45 ACP versus 40 Smith & Wesson. What we have today here is our Hornady Custom ammunition. Our 45 ACP is a 200 grain XTP, and our 40 Smith & Wesson is a 155 grain XTP, and these are both about the same sectional density, and that's really what matters when you're talking about comparing cartridges, is to have about the same sectional density. So these are a little bit light for caliber compared to, you know, the heavier bullet weights, but the sectional density is the same, so that's really a fair way to compare the cartridges. So I got my 5.3 inch Glock 41 for the 45 ACP, got our 5-inch M&P 40 for our 40 Smith & Wesson. A little bit more barrel travel with the 45, however the 45 cartridge is actually longer, so it kind of equals out a little bit. So we'll see what we get with these. So I'm going to go through the chronograph, see what kind of velocity and accuracy I get at the same time. Then I'm going to do my 10% clear ballistic test. I'm just going to go into plain clear ballistic, see what the best potential is of those cartridges are, and then after that I'm going to do more of our real world simulation. We've got 4 layers of denim in the first part of this 3-inch piece here. After that, we're going to have a 1/4 inch medium density fiberboard that's going to represent hitting ribs or sternum. That'll be more of our real world simulation. And then, as always, I am going to shoot at my steel to see what kind of practical accuracy I can get with these. So let's get started with this test. All right, I'm about 5 yards from the target, 4 yards from the chronograph. First up, we have our 40 Smith & Wesson 155 grain, rated at 1180 feet per second. Let's see what I get here. 1162. 1180, 1184, 1159, 1194. So pretty close to rated velocity. Not the best accuracy I've seen. Now our 45 ACP 200 grain, this is rated at 900 feet per second. Let's see what I get. 904, 911. 899, 912, 919. So about rated velocity. I do notice though that the 45 actually had less felt recoil. It was very spongy feeling. The 40 Smith & Wesson had a little bit more snap to it. So let's try our ballistics shell block and see how these compare. All right, let's do our best potential shot here. 40 Smith & Wesson, plain clear ballistics. All right, put that with our 45 ACP now. Go take a look. All right, so I kind of expected this, to be honest here, that we have similar penetration, because when you're talking sectional density, being the same, that's where momentum really comes into play. Momentum is a big part of how deep a bullet's going to go. So what we have here though is our 40 Smith & Wesson. We went to about 13.5 inches. It does look like we have expansion. Our 45 ACP, we went to about 14 inches. Looks like we have expansion. Now I will say, in the first 3 inches and along the, most of this track, the 40 Smith & Wesson definitely has a lot more damage going on here. Yeah, I'm flipped it upside down. Our 40 is the one on the top now, and our 45 is on the bottom. So it's flipped upside down. So a lot more damage with that 40 Smith & Wesson, but overall they did pretty similarly. So let's put on our denim and put in our MDF, see how they compare that way. All right, our real world simulation, 40 Smith & Wesson, 4 layers of denim, 3 inches of clear ballistics, a 1/4 inch medium density fiberboard, 40 Smith & Wesson. Wow. All right, hit it with our 45 ACP above that. Let's go take a look. All right, so our 40 Smith & Wesson, way too much. We had a whole bunch of, tumbling right here. Let's take a look at our MDF here. Bottom one's our 40, and it doesn't appear that we have expansion with either of these as it hit this. Those are about the same size hole as where they started. But our 40 Smith & Wesson, wow, that surprises me for being a 155 grain. We had limited expansion. I know the parallax of this camera makes this look like it's not lined up with my finger where it is, but it is exactly lined up here at 30 inches of penetration. Our 45 ACP, it did pretty good damage. Not as good as right here, but that's more than likely tumbling. So it's really kind of hard to count that. We look at our actual tearing damage up here. Looks like the 45 did a little bit better. And our total penetration path went to about 18 3/4 inches penetration. But again, we don't see any expansion. So interesting here, kind of disappointing. I was hoping that these would do beautifully, but I'm not seeing anything that looks that good. Now with our 45, I would say that's acceptable because we got plenty of penetration and we did not over penetrate really. So I would say that's pretty good. Our 40 Smith & Wesson, you know, being that the MDF shot is more than double the penetration of the plain gel, that says a lot there. That's not very consistent. So let me shoot our steel, see what kind of practical accuracy I can get with these. All right, so here's the close-up look at these bullets here. 40 Smith & Wesson, 45 ACP. Overall, our expansion is about the same. Maybe a little more with the 40, but overall pretty similar expansion. So not bad when we look at our plain gel shot here. Now when we look at our medium density fiberboard, our 45 had such a large hollow cavity that it was able to expand open enough to kick that denim out, also just to, you know, fill up with gel enough to expand a little bit and to slow down and not over penetrate. Our 40 Smith & Wesson, the hollow cavity was too small for that. We got a plug of denim and it drove that bullet kind of like a Full Metal Jacket flat point. So way too much penetration with that 40. So overall our 45 I would say is a little bit better here. So that's a close-up look at those bullets. All right, I am kind of soured on that performance, so I'm not going to do practical accuracy and shootability. I'm probably not going to recommend either of these just because I didn't get very good performance. So why not just shoot for fun at some distance, because hollow point ammunition is generally pretty accurate at distance, and just have some fun with these. So 75 yards from the target, 40 Smith & Wesson. See if I can make any hits. A little bit low left, low right. All right, so those last two shots I aimed off the target to the left, because it seemed like to me I'm starting to see a little bit more consistent hits to the right of that target. So they were just shooting a little bit right for me. Not the best accuracy I've seen. 45 ACP. See how this does for me. All right, so not the best. I did pull one really, really high, but I saw kind of the opposite consistency here where they kind of wanted to shoot left for me. A lot of people will see what I do with my Glock and they'll be like, oh, that's all you. Like, people that don't know how to shoot semi-autos will shoot to the left. But I've heard a lot of people say the same thing I'm saying is that I could shoot a lot of pistols center but Glocks will shoot left for me. And I think what that has to do with is anytime I've talked to anybody that they said it shoots left for them, they have similar hands to mine where they're relatively thick palms. And what you'll see a lot of times is you see people with very thin hands with long fingers shoot a Glock like this. I can't really get into it because there's such a big gap there. And they'll hold it in a certain way, and that Glock will shoot fine for them. And then you take somebody that'll shoot everything else fine when they're shooting kind of like this or whatever. And then they'll shoot that Glock, and a Glock will shoot left just by the way that grip angle is and everything like that. I'm not an expert on the angles, but I've noticed that personally, that the Glock grip angle is kind of weird unless you are mechanically doing everything exactly, thumbs forward, and you have to have really skinny hands to pull that off. If you don't, then it's not going to be able to pull that off anyway. But enough with that. They seemed like pretty accurate rounds at distance, except, you know, one shot really far to the right, one shot really far to the left. So the left thing could just be the Glock. You know, that's just what I happen to have. I think overall, though, our 45 probably has a greater potential for accuracy. It just seemed like easier to hit for me. As well, the 40, it just seemed kind of like it was more off center than what it should have been. Even on paper up close, I did notice some rounds go to the right, and that's not typical for me with 40 Smith & Wesson or whatever. In these pistols, generally, you know, I might get one right, one left, whatever. It's all pretty consistent, the errors on me. What I'm seeing with this is they're all hitting right on the paper. Until I started aiming, I aimed a little bit left, even at 5 yards, to get more center, make sure I get those chronograph reads. But overall, our ballistics isn't that good. XTP can be a good bullet, but it just seems like it has a lot of trouble penetrating denim and bone type material. So not the best in that regard. I would say here, when we look at these, based on the potential of these, I would say our 45 is way better of a cartridge here. And this ammo, not overall 40 Smith & Wesson I think is better, but with that 40 Smith & Wesson, you can have a lot better potential than this stuff. This stuff didn't perform that well at all. Now 45 ACP, we get to the point where in order to get expansion every time, you have to get a plus P, and it's usually pretty brutal recoil. What I'm seeing with this 200 grain XTP is it had a nice balance. And, you know, it's a standard pressure, and being a standard pressure 200 grain, it had a little less muzzle flip than a standard pressure 230 grain. Just a very pleasant to shoot for a 45 ACP. And yet we had good performance because our penetration wasn't extreme. It was not really over penetrating. Got to remember, a 45 does not get smaller. That's something. So that's what you get today with this ammunition. Not the best, but you know, I think I only spent $18, $19 a box for this, so what else can I expect? So that's what you get today. So as always, comment, share, and like, and thanks for watching.